Hello, bold movers, and welcome back to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Rocco, and my guest today is Genevieve Dozier. What makes Genevieve's story perfect for this show is that she refuses to pick just one lane. While navigating a high-level corporate career, she also launched Warpaint Consulting, where she advises on business strategy and professional and personal development. She is a powerhouse in the fintech space with 2 decades of experience, ranging from leadership roles at major financial institutions like BB&T and Fiserv to the C-suite of high-growth startups. She's a multi-award winner, including being named to the Women in Fintech Power List and the Electronic Transaction Association's Top 40 Under 40. She's living proof that you can hold the corporate title and the entrepreneurial dream all at the same time. Hello, Genevieve. Welcome to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast. So great to have you here.
Hello, Kristen. Thank you for having me.
I just can't wait for this conversation. You know, we really haven't talked much about having a portfolio career on this podcast. So it's going to be amazing to introduce your story to these Bold Move listeners to show what's possible in having a portfolio career. You are a full-time leader at a fintech company right now, and you're also the founder of a consulting firm. And I'd love to really trace back to where this duality started. Can you take us through your career journey? Where did it start? And how did it evolve into the portfolio career you have now?
Thanks so much, Kristen. I love sharing my story. I read once that, sharing your story might be someone else's survival guide. So I'm a big proponent of that. So again, thank you for the opportunity. But yeah, I started at a top 10 bank back in 2006, and I was there for 10 years. And I honestly was just taking my parents' advice at that time, being right out of college, 22, and just, they said, find a good job that has retirement and pension, work there 30 years and retire. And so that was the plan. And I did a really good job there. I moved up very quickly. They promoted me to a leader pretty early on. And then they promoted me to what would be a C-suite in a startup if it wasn't, a top 10 bank, right? So as part of the division, I reported to the president of the division when I was age 30. And so I had, 2 very young kids, and I was really juggling that kind of devotion to the corporate life, if you will. I was 12-hour days in office, 2-hour commute round trip. My kids were in daycare almost 12 hours a day. And then we were, picked up takeout, bath, bed, and then did it all again the next day. And after 10 years of being in that, 10 years total, right, at the bank. And after about 2 years of being in that particular role, I didn't know at the time, but I was experiencing burnout. I didn't really know. I feel like the world didn't really coin that term until the pandemic, right? I feel like that's when you started hearing, the word burnout. And I was experiencing it then too, but for different reasons. But I was having this pain in my neck and my back. And I was like, well, this isn't right. And I feel like a lot of it was, and I couldn't turn my head a certain way. So I was going in and getting some physical therapy, but it was stress that was affecting me physically. And there were some other things as well that kind of led to my decision I was the only female on that team. And, I think all of them actually had stay-at-home wives, that took care of their kids, right? So very different dynamic for me trying to go full on corporate woman, but also try to feel like a good mom. And it's interesting because there was an actual bank C-suite female that told me around this time that she said there will get to a point in your career, thinking I was continuing to kind of move up in the bank ladder, or you'll have to pick your family or your career. And I thought that advice was crazy. I was like, there's no way. Why would you have to pick, right? But I understood later what she meant. And it is, you're either going full on into your career, that 12-hour day, barely kind of spending any time with your family, or you're potentially taking a more junior role So you're not, having to
Mm.
work so much in your career, and then you have a little bit more time to spend with your family. And that's just the reality of it. That's just, unfortunately, when you look at big corporate America, right? I think when we talk about fintech and startups, that's
Mhm.
different, right? They don't require like so much from them, depending on the type of company, of course. But I thought that was interesting, and so I chose, right? I chose at that point in my life, I chose to focus on the goal of being a good mom while selling in my career.
How did it make you feel when somebody told you that and potentially it conflicted with your values? How did you react to that and interpret it in your own life?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was taken back. I thought, I just thought this is awful. Like, this is awful, right? Because someone who did, we were told, right, back in 2006, again, it was like, climb that ladder, right? Go work at that job. They're 30 years and retire. And I think my immediate reaction, I know my immediate reaction was no. Like, I'm not going to choose. Like, that's not going to be my trajectory. And so subconsciously, I ended up making that choice there and then, which then kind of led me down a path of where I am today. And really where it started was I left that bank 10 years in, shortly after I had that conversation. And I ended up going to a job that, we'll just say, it was a stepping stone, right? Just to then for me to get the other one that really put me in that place where it was a work remote job. Never
Mhm.
had a work remote job before. Didn't even know what that was really. The bank was 5 days in the office, but I got the work remote job. And all of a sudden it was like,
Mhm.
okay, I can kind of work when I need. I mean, be available during
Mhm.
normal business hours, but I could work a little bit extra early in the morning if I want, work a little
Mhm.
bit late at night if I want, or, go to my kids', events at school, or go do things with them. And or they're here right next to me, in the room while I'm on conference calls or doing trainings. And then even when I with that role, I had to travel a little bit more. But in my mind, that was okay because when I wasn't traveling, like, I was here at home with my
Mhm.
kids. So I was achieving that.
Yeah. Well, and when you're telling that story, it's making me realize that everybody filters their advice through their own personal experience. So that woman that gave you that advice, that was probably how she delineated her choices or thought about her choices. And it just took, you to be open to other possibilities of, no, this is what I feel like is right for me. How do I put the pieces together to be able to fulfill what is best for me? So I love that, Genevieve, and that we can share with bold movers to realize the advice you're getting is coming from everybody's own personal experience, and so you have to filter that through your lens, as Genevieve did, to decide how you want to digest that feedback.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and you're spot on, Kristen, because she actually shared during that conversation that when she was called up to C-suite of the 10th largest bank, that she had to move, and her daughter was about to start her senior year in high school, and her daughter was begging her, like, please, I don't want to move. Like, let me just finish my senior year and then we can move. And she said, no, we're moving. Her daughter in tears, and
Wow.
she moved to accept the role. And so to your point, that was in her mind, right? I could see where she would
Yeah.
delineate that. Yeah.
So you've been building and growing a thriving career in the fintech space. You've become a leader at 30 already. You are on this amazing trajectory. How did Warpaint Consulting come into the picture?
Yeah, so no, I was thriving at that, job that I mentioned, that fintech company that was work remote. And about 18 months or so in, the company was purchased. And so M&A in corporate America is something that
Yeah.
can never be, estimated, right? And it's potentially inevitable. And I cried because I knew, coming from a big company who purchased a lot of small companies,
Yes.
that we were just going to get swallowed up. And that was what happened. But luckily, I was able to stay with my leadership,
Mhm.
and they were so supportive and amazing human beings. And so I was able to stay with them through the acquisition of the company that purchased us. And so I was there a total of 5 years. Um, Loved it. I mean, when you talk about work-life balance and supportive leadership, I mean, they supported me from my family perspective, from doing, things like this, from going to like women's conferences. They were like, yes, go network, go, meet with the ladies. I say that because they were all male leadership, but they were genuinely supportive. I was thriving in that environment. And then I received an offer. So someone called me up and asked me to come on board of their startup to be their chief business development officer. So this was kind of first time C-suite at a fintech startup. So of course, I feel like it's that angel and devil on your shoulder, right? It is that succeed in corporate, right? Be a good mom, right? Or, the kind of that balance. And so of course, this side was like, yes, like C-suite at a startup, and it was still work remote. So, I mean, everything sounded fine. And so I made the move to that company, and everything was going great. And then to your point of kind of why I started up Warpaint was my mother-in-law fell ill. I mean, literally within a few days, she passed away. And so we had never lost anyone that close to us, since I was a kid. And we took on a primary caregiver role for my father-in-law as soon as she passed away. And so he lives about 15 minutes away from me, and he's fairly self-sufficient there, but there was a lot that he had never cooked. He had never done laundry. He definitely had never used a computer. I took over all his finances, but taking on this immediately, it was one thing taking care of my kids, my husband, myself, and now I'm having to take care of my father-in-law who's, 77. So at the time he would have been 74. So that's what caused me to take a respite from corporate, because I just couldn't, at that time, I could not handle juggling at all. And so I took a step away. I took care of him to get him situated. It was during the summer. So then I kind of spent a month with my kids, just doing fun things with them. And then the next month I started up Warpaint Consulting because I said, why not? Right? Like, why? I saw other people starting up their own companies. And I was like, this would be the best thing for me right now, to have the freedom and flexibility to, work when I want, work when I need, be my own boss. And I felt like I had so many valuable skills that could transfer over. I just had to figure out like what were all the skills that I could offer, solutions, services, products, and then how to market them, right? And then ultimately get customers. So that's how it started.
I want to circle back to the experience you had with the you were describing the dynamic of multitasking with and the struggle that many women face with having a thriving career, feeling very ambitious and that you want to continue to grow your career and reach your full potential and do everything you can while also raising kids. While also then, when you get into your midlife, becoming part of the sandwich generation where you have elderly parents who then have issues and that they have to be taken care of. It's a lot. And unfortunately, it falls on women often. So I wonder, thinking back to that experience, of just having to make these decisions because, caretaking was an important part that needed to be handled at that time. How did you rationalize the choices you were making to not buy into the cultural dialogue that, oh no, if I sidestep into something else or a caregiving role, I'm taking away from my career? It's almost as if it's a subtractive thing where it's like, no, we as humans, we have a full life of so many different aspects and things require our time at different times. So, did you do anything to help walk yourself through that might be beneficial for people who feel the pressure of all of the things that they're handling at once and needing to balance all the balls and feeling like they're just not doing enough in every area? Like, what can you offer to them that could help them feel like, relax, it's okay, things will be great, you will get back to where you want to go?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things helped prepare me for that I didn't know, right? Things that I did, right? But I can tell you in the moment, right? Like I made the decision. But previously, so I went to the Women in Payments conference every year in Washington, D.C., and I went to it several years prior. I want to say maybe 3 to 4 years prior to that instance happening. And a corporate woman from a large, global company was our keynote at the dinner. And she got up and she kind of talked about her career journey, just like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And she, of course, older than me. And so she referenced kind of her career journey doing this, and I think that was the first time I heard anyone out loud be honest about that. And she talked about times with her kids or her family stepping away or stepping down, like, taking a less kind of responsible role. And so that stayed with me. She also made a comment that, when you look around your company and you don't see you being a fit in any other role, she's like, that's the time that you need to leave the company. So I think that was like then like a backwards moment for me, like, oh, maybe that's what I was thinking when I was at kind of my first company. So that really helped me kind of set a precedent of, I'm a big believer, like when you see someone and you hear someone, it's like they give you permission without
Yeah.
giving you permission, because you've seen that, someone else can do that. Maybe I can do that too. I felt like I had a good resume. So I felt like if I took a step away and it was for this reason, that I could easily explain that if I decided to go back into the job force. And honestly, if someone wouldn't want to hire me for that break that I took because I mentally and physically needed it, then that wouldn't be someone that I would want to work for anyway. And I think realizing that, and everyone realizing that, and that you have power as an applicant, right, as an employee, that kind of power is really empowering.
That's a mic drop moment. I think that we all have to remember this is a two-way street. It's not just about who is going to hire you, but who are you hiring on the other side? What's the best fit for you? Do they align with your values? Are they going to support the lifestyle that you want? I think that's an incredibly important message for women, especially. It makes me also think like we shouldn't always be the ones who have to bear the responsibility. And it's a given that we're the ones who have to step back or we have to do all the things. We should have equal partnership in these things as well. But society is still evolving. I know these are the pressures that we all face. Women are super women in a lot of ways, but advocating for yourself too and making sure that you're interviewing the company that you want to be a part of because it fits your lifestyle and your values. Yeah, I think that's a really
Yeah.
important message. So I'm glad you shared it.
Yeah, well, and I'll add on to kind of what you were mentioning there, Kristen, because I do want to point out, because I do share this a lot, because I don't feel like a lot of women share it, is there was a time when I first started that work remote role, my husband stepped away from his job so that he could be kind of full-time caregiver of the kids while I was focusing on that. We also bought a home that needed a lot of renovations, so he was kind of taking that on. So we kind of looked at that as like his salary, the money that we were saving versus paying someone. But for 2 years, he was a stay-at-home dad. And he, was reluctant to tell people that because of kind of the, opinion and, society judgment. And, even I was kind of reluctant to mention it. But then same thing at that same Women in Payments conference, I heard many other women mention that their husbands stayed at home or had stayed at home at some point during their career. So I think we should be talking more about that and being comfortable with, whichever again, I think it's an ebb and flow over your entire life about what's going on at this moment in time and what makes more sense for your family and career opportunities and happiness. I loved how you said kind of us interviewing companies, right? And I think the other thing that I've done really well, and again, it's from attending a lot of conferences that do a lot of self-development work. I've read a lot of books on confidence and mindset. And so that's really helped me be self-reflective to understand, what are my values? What do I want? What do I need in a workplace to not just be successful, but to actually feel happiness and feel peace of mind and not feel stressed all the time. And I've narrowed it down to a couple of key things I wanted to share with your listeners around the time that I left and went to that C-suite at the startup because I did love what I had there. So I kind of, that was part of my reflection. But it was that these were my requirements of a
Mm.
company, not my expectation, my requirements. I think that's important too for your listeners, is to make this list. And for everyone, it's going to be a different list. But for me specifically, it was that me and my company and my leadership, we had to have a mutual trust, respect, support. Those are key. And then I have to like what I'm doing. I have to, for the most part, at least, I have to like who I work with. Again, for the most part, like there could be one outlier, right? In these things, no job is going to be perfect. I like who I work for, your leadership. And then I believe in what I'm selling, because even if you're not in sales, whatever company you're working for, right, you're still ultimately selling their solution. So you have to believe in that company and what they're doing. And you have to have the resources that you need from that company to be successful in that role. So I think those are
Mhm.
like my key check boxes when I've, in my past when I've been looking for a new role.
It is empowering for people to think about, this is what I need from you, employer. I'm not just giving you all of me with nothing in return. No, this isn't an equal exchange, a relationship. It goes two ways.
Yeah.
I want to start talking about this parallel pathing as a form of career diversification. I wonder if knowing you have this other income stream or this other identity gave you a sense of safety or autonomy that you didn't have before. Why did you ultimately decide to stick with Warpaint Consulting even when you did end up going back and getting another full-time corporate job?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it really did empower me starting my own company. One, because it was like, can I do it? I think I can. Let's do it. And and again, I turned my mantra. My first 10 years of career was, what if? What if I were to do this? And I flipped that into, why not? Like, why not do this? Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's not going to, succeed. Okay, then I'll find something, right? Like, so that's always my biggest advice now to my current mindset of why not, right? And if you can't really think of a great reason that's not gonna, just completely break you, then do it, And so with Warpaint, yeah, when I was going back to another company, I, had my pitch ready of like, here's what I'm doing. It truly is a side hustle. And it was important to me that any company I was going to work for was supportive of that. And a lot of companies, whether it's formal or informal, so I worked at a startup, they were like, oh, it's fine. Like I talked to the owner of the company, he's like, it's fine. Like you don't have to do anything. But then when I worked for a more formal, larger corporation, they have an outside business activity policy and you have to follow the guidelines. So you have to just ensure that you're within those. And so I did, when I went back, I did kind of tweak kind of services I was offering so it didn't, conflict with either. I continue posting thought leadership and conversing about it with my network. And so sometimes I'll get referrals from just people in my network that are my friends. They'll say, hey, I saw this job opportunity for Warpaint, and so they send it my way, and so then I'll explore it if it kind of comes my way. So that's where I'm at right now with it. But to circle back, I mean, there is no stronger support than having people that you can talk to. I remember telling someone probably around that time, of just trying to decide, right? Do I start my own company? Do I look for another job? And they said, don't suffer in silence, right? So it's like, tell people what you're kind of going through, like get lots of different perspectives from our
Mhm.
point earlier of like some advice you take, some advice you don't. But it was interesting because I talked to one of my friends after I started Warpaint, and she said I actually inspired her to start
Mhm.
up her own LLC because she said when life gives you lemons, you make Warpaint Consulting. I was just so though I like that probably was the biggest compliment to me or feeling versus like just as important as getting a customer win because she was at a company where she didn't feel stability and she was feeling like I might be part of a layoff. And
Mhm.
so she was like, maybe I'll start up my own LLC. So then it's there in my pocket, like not do anything with it, but she did the paperwork, right? She did the state LLC paperwork. So it was there, but she kind of just had it in her pocket so that if something happened, then she could, then start to do something with it. And so I thought that was, a really nice, kind of win that came out of just me starting my own company and socializing it and having those, conversations with the fintech payments community of true friends that I've built. And I've worked really hard to build that, but it has been through vulnerability and sharing my raw, honest experiences that's been really relatable with others.
I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper. So it sounds like the one huge benefit of having a side hustle or a side project would be the plan B aspect, right? The plan B of like, we're in a world of a lot of layoffs right now, right? And so it's nice to know that you have something that you can fall back on if you need it. So it sounds like it satisfied a need in that way. But I also wonder what other ways that it led to other fulfillment that you couldn't find in your corporate life. Because and I also remember that you mentioned that you started writing on the plane. So it's not just the business what Warpaint Consulting, but it's also the other things that you're able to filter through Warpaint Consulting, I believe, that you may have been interested in keeping it because it allows you to express yourself differently than you can do in your corporate life. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation for bold movers listening. How does it help you be your full self that you can't necessarily get out of your corporate career?
No, I love that you brought that up because it is so much to talk about. No, I didn't. I was working on something recently for Warpaint on the weekend, and I told my husband, I was like, I was like, this is what I love to do, right? Like talking about what I was working on, and he was like, I know. And so, to your point, it is what I love to do, and I think so many people are like, if you could do this one thing, right, for your job, like this would be it. It's just not, at the point where it can substitute that full-time income. And believe me, if there was a way I could make it work and feel financially secure, I would. I would go full on head first. But yes, I think that creative outlet you mentioned, doing what I love to do. So a lot of what I've done recently is just paid motivational speaking. And helping, coach folks on confidence, on self-care, on kind of that work-life balance. And I really enjoy that because I really feel like I help people. And that even in the business world, I've done, analysis on myself. And when it comes down to business tasks that I enjoy, it's because at the core, it's helping someone.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a core value of mine. But I think the helping them through Warpaint is more straightforward, And then yeah, I started writing my book when I was C-suite at that startup. I write on the plane because there's no distractions, that white noise, and I can just be in my head. I write on the beach. So my book will be a product of Warpaint Consulting. I'm on chapter 7 of a planned 12. And
Yeah.
that is my work of love there. And I hope when it's published that it will help so many people because it talks about my journey. It's kind of part memoir, part how to stand your ground and be successful in the war of being a woman in business. But of course, it's applicable to not just women, of course.
Yeah, this is so great because often we think we're going to find all the fulfillment through our career. And it's just not true. I've experienced this so many times in my life. And actually, it's been the foundation of a lot of entrepreneurial starts I've had. Once I'm in a transition period, I'll often start a project because I needed more creativity in my life. I started Love Notary because of that. And, now I started Bold Moves podcast because I was looking for the creativity of expressing myself as an interviewer. So I think, we have different experiences around, why we started the side project or the hobby or the side business. But it all is around this fact that like we don't expect to get everything out of our corporate careers. And so this helps express ourselves in all of the ways of who we are, not just the one direction. So I love that you were able to bring that to life. So now I'm inside of the head of somebody listening who is terrified to make this move because their employer will see it as a distraction. Did you have to overcome the fear of being found out or judged, or even how did you get comfortable being visible with both sides of your career?
Yeah, no, it's a great question and it's real. And my word for this year is unafraid. And
Mhm.
I've carried that from prior years with me, but I'm being very intentional on referencing that one word a lot in my thought. It's funny. I was talking to one of my good friends. She used to be my employee, and then
Mhm.
she had turned into, I was kind of like she was my mentee, and now we're like best friends, right? Over a many year journey. But I was talking to her about some of this, and I said, but what will people think? And she said, Genevieve, what people? She was like, you have to do what's right for you. And so that's another kind of mic drop
Mhm.
moment that has
Mhm.
lived in my head. And now that
Mhm.
she's right, that, no one knows your full self. And I love how you reference that no one knows, your journey, everything that's going on kind of behind, behind the camera, behind the email, right? And you have to do what's right for you. And so I think it's good, right, with your direct supervisor to be authentic and have those conversations of your focus, right? And it is, on the job that they're paying you to do, and then work, during your off hours, and again, it may not be a lot, right? But I think having that honest conversation, so at least your direct employer knows exactly what's going on. So if someone else has potentially a problem, with it, or this perception, right, then they should go talk to them, about it, right? Because that's
Mhm.
really all that matters, right? If your manager approves, or, whatever it is at your company, they, as long as you get, the correct approval,
Mhm.
right, they're aware of it. And again, it's funny because even I know someone else that has a side hustle, and same thing, it's her love, and it's completely not
Mhm.
anything to do with corporate America. It's like
Right.
something completely different. But she's even said to me, like, yeah, people are like, oh, she's probably not working at work because she's working on this thing, and it's like not true at all. So I think it's just, you have to cut the noise. You're doing, what you're doing, and just being confident in that.
I wonder if you find that having this separate creative outlet through Warpaint Consulting changes how you show up as an executive in corporate. So, like, does Genevieve, the entrepreneur, bring something different to the boardroom than Genevieve, the employee, did 10 years ago?
That's a tough one. I think Genevieve, the entrepreneur, tries to come out and
Mhm.
tries to potentially, push back, right, with a different opinion, because she is more confident. She knows she has a voice and she's trying to use it. However, in some rooms in, corporate America, we'll say, and this is, multiple companies I'm thinking of, you know, they don't want that. Still to this day in 2026, right? It's very traditional. And
Well,
so I
and
think
this
that
to
is kind of
me
a struggle.
is actually another reason why having your own thing is a great thing, because you're right. In corporate life, a lot of times you have some say around what you do and how you do it, but there's a lot of ways that you don't. And when you have a side project or side hustle, side business, a creative outlet like writing a book, it's all you. The decision making is all about you and what you want and how you want to spend your time. And I think that also adds to some fulfillment in your professional corporate life as well, because you're like, you know what, right, in this space, maybe I don't have the autonomy here, and so, it's more collaborative and I have to, orient myself towards the goals of the organization more, but I do have a place to express my autonomy and my authority in my other business. When you look at the bold moves you're making now, how do you redefine ambition as you've moved along
Oh,
in
yeah.
your career
Okay.
trajectory?
My, parents told me, right, from an early age, go to college, graduate high school, graduate college, which I'm a first gen college grad, very proud of that. Get a job, get married, right, have kids. Like that was the life plan. And I did that, right? And one of my first boss, actually, my first company, said, just keep your head down, just do a good job and people will recognize you. And I did that, and I did get promoted. And that worked. But I think my biggest change, and I could probably pinpoint exactly when it was if I thought a little bit longer, but my biggest change, I would say now, I would never give anyone that advice ever, right? I would say you have to advocate for yourself, right? You do need to speak up. You do have a voice. Like, what's the point in having a voice if you don't use it, right? And I think it's still kind of understanding how you'll be perceived. But like when I first started my career, it was like, oh God, if you speak up in a meeting, like you better have all your facts, you better have a solution. If I mean, it was scary, like they scared you into being quiet, almost like they were like, putting their hand over your mouth. Where now it's like, no, like I'm not going to be quiet, right? And I'm going to advocate for myself, and then I'm also going to advocate for others if I see, things that are going on that I feel passionate about that shouldn't be going on, right? So I think that's probably the biggest kind of change in the ambition. Well, and I think to answer your question, Kristen, actually, I'll look at it a bit more broad. Like I thought you just could have one job, right? It's just one job. That's all you focus on, right? I never knew. I mean, gosh, I think I wrote down one time all the quote unquote titles that I have, right? And like I was on a board. I've been on a couple of boards, right? But I was a board on a nonprofit. I was on a board of a payments company. I was, been a contributing author to Forbes.
Yeah.
I do volunteer work at a kids cooking club, right? But then I started a mentor program at my local school, mentoring middle school and high school age and college students on kind of preparing them for kind of when they leave school, what happens. Gosh, and then it's like, oh yeah, and by the way, I do have a job, right? But it's like there's all these things that I never would have even thought of. Yeah, I did consultant work even when I was, just kind of 1 hour here and there kind of consultant work before I started my consultancy. I didn't even know like people got paid for that, right? These companies started reaching out to me when I was a little bit more loud on LinkedIn. And we're like, oh my gosh, you're a saleswoman and you have all this experience. So will you do these 1 hour paid consulting? I'll be like, wait, you're going to pay me to speak for 1 hour? Like, okay, amazing, right? Also from that, I had a woman reach out to me and they were writing a book about $100 million deals. It was called Mega Deals. And she had lots of men salespeople contributors, but not female sales contributors. And I was like, well, I've sold $1 million deals. And so I was also contributed to that book too. So I've had 3 books now that I've contributed in. Oh, actually 4. The 4th one hasn't been published yet though. It's on the way. I'm really excited about that one because it's one of my good friends that's writing it. So yeah, I'm podcast guest. I remember the first time I did like a YouTube video. My kids were, like kind of peeking through the window and I was recording it. They were like, "You're a YouTube star?" I was like, "Well, no," but again, so it's like when you look back, I think now 22-year-old Genevieve would have never even thought that she could have done all these things and would have. I mean, that wasn't even anywhere in the hemisphere. And that's why I do go back to going to these conferences and going to these kind of networking type things are so important because that's even where I saw all these things were even possible.
Yeah, I was going to ask you like you've shared some amazing experiences and examples of like how life has kind of changed from your vision at what you could see at 22 and then to now all of these opportunities that you've had. What would you say are some of the core traits that have helped you like I said wiggle. That's not really what I mean, but to get into these new opportunities, like curiosity, openness, like, yeah, what would you tell bold movers about like stay curious, be open? What other things come to mind around what guided you from, specific traits that you feel like really helped shape some of these opportunities for you?
No, it's a good question. I've had people describe me as very, very ambitious. And I'm saying this because like I don't know myself, right? I just kind of do things. But I am, very ambitious. Like I had a guy one time said, you have an ambition that I've never seen before. And I think it is more of a hunger. And but from like but from persevering through hard situations. So I had a lot of tough situations from my childhood that then I feel like kind of my life thereafter, I kind of created a goal, even if it was subconscious. And then I was like, okay, here's how I think I can achieve this goal. And I made a plan and then I achieved it. And it was like, check, and then I just moved on to the next because it was the same thing. Like, I want to get out of my teeny tiny little town. I need to go to college. Here's what I need to do. Went to college, check, right? I wanted to do a study abroad, went to Paris, check, right? Like, and I think that's been true even when I started going to these conferences and I saw a female speaker get up and she was saying things similar to what I had experienced. And I was like, so then in my mind, I'm like, wait, I could be up there speaking because she's saying the same things like I've thought or I've experienced. And so I was like, I'm going to be a speaker. Check. Right. And then I think, someone was talking about a board and I had a little bit of that imposter syndrome where I'm like, oh, I'm not board material, right? I think I even said that actually. And the woman I was conversing with, she said, oh my gosh, Genevieve, yes, you are board material. So again, it's kind of having those conversations, right? Believing in yourself, having goals of wanting to do the thing. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to figure out how to get on that board then. And I, researched it. I applied, did the interview process, reached out to a couple of people with references, got on the board, check, So same thing. I've heard of someone that she was writing a book. I was like, you know what? I was like, I've thought about writing a book. I was like, I'm going to write a book, So that's how I've worked. So that's really, I know it's like not really giving you a core trait per se, but that's more of how my life has kind of gone.
Yeah, I see a through line. I see that you were clear about what you desired. And sometimes you didn't really know what you desired until you saw somebody else doing it. And then you realized that it was something that you did desire. And then you made a plan, which is the bold moves recipe in a nutshell. This is the pattern I've seen around a lot of bold movers is they start with what is core to their desire. They talk to other people if they don't know how to get to where they want to go, or they go out and find people who are doing it so they know it's possible, and then they take the action. Yeah. Okay, I've got one final question, and then I want to move us into rapid fire. So the first question before the rapid fire, which could be rapid fire, but for the listener who loves their job, they don't want to quit it, but another dimension of themselves they aren't expressing. They have a book inside them, maybe it's a consulting idea, they have a desire to speak. What do you want to leave them with about exploring a parallel path?
Yeah, I would say do it, right? The advice you just gave was great, right? Research it. I love like talking to someone who's actually doing it so you can get the reality of it, right? Like, but on my other advice around making a big decision is, do it if you're excited, nervous, but if you're scared, nervous, then maybe keep thinking about it. Because I'm a big proponent of like listening to your body and, whether you call it your gut or, faith or instinct, whatever you would refer to it as is like, listen to that because you don't want to go kind of against your body. Right. But if you're like feeling you're so excited, like I'm nervous, but I'm so excited, like definitely don't wait. And, I've lots of things say don't wait for the right moment, but again, I'm a big believer in making sure, it feels good.
It's a really interesting insight that you just shared about, and we've talked about that a lot on the podcast about the gut feeling, the intuition helping to guide you into what you should go for. And you explained it differently than I've heard, which is excited, nervous, or scared, nervous. But yet you said your word of the year is unafraid. So I'm going to ask you, how do you know that scared isn't just because it's a fear holding you back versus a real danger red flag?
It's a great point, Kristen. I would take the word fear out of it. Fear and failure are like I hate those words, honestly, because I always say like with failure, like you didn't fail, right? You just tried something and it didn't work out as you thought it would, right? Like failure, I feel like is such a negative word. But yeah, I would take the fear out of it. And I would say more from the scare nervous side of it, it's more just doing some additional research to see if you can get excited, nervous with it. I mean, I'll give you a real life example right now. I would go full on Warpaint, However, it does not substitute my income. I'm not sure what my financial runway would be to where then I wouldn't have any money to pay for my house, and we'd have to put it up for
Mhm.
sale or rent it, and then move me, my husband, and my 2 teenagers
Mhm.
in with my father-in-law. And so that's what's holding me back. I mean, that's real talk.
Yeah.
That's my scared, nervous. And it's more so if it was just me or just me and my husband, I would do it. Like, let's just start over, right? But because I have my teenagers and I know they're used to a certain quality of life and they would not be all in on this,
Yes.
radical change, that's what's holding me back as far as the scared, nervous.
I love that we broke that down a little bit more because it's like the research part is so important to really know, is it reality for me to pursue this? And I think that's a little bit different than just being scared emotionally, right? So
Yeah.
I'm happy that you share that, and thank you for the vulnerability in that. That's really helpful.
Well,
That
and
real
and
talk.
that's real because I've talked to
Yeah.
some other founders, which they're like, no, stay in your corporate job, right? Like they love being a founder and they love their company and they're trying to make it work, but they're like, no, stay, right?
Yeah.
Because they gave me personal example and they were raw with me. Where one said, he cashed out his 401k and that's what's funding the business, and he's trying to get some more investors.
Mhm.
Another female founder, they have a home equity line of credit, and that's basically what's
Mhm.
paying for everything while she's trying to continue to get revenue from her company. And so, I mean, those are real conversations that, when you get people that will share their actual experiences with you are so valuable.
But it's like, have the conversations around what you want. Don't just stop because you're scared. Like, go further and explore it and see if it's reality for you. I love that so much, Genevieve.
Yeah.
Okay, so a quick few rapid fire questions for you, Genevieve. When was a time that letting your guard down actually became your biggest advantage?
So it was when I had moved. I had moved my whole family for a job after I left my first company. The one I mentioned was a skipping stone. I After about 6 weeks into that role, I realized it was not a good fit. And I just moved my husband and my 2 kids to a different state. My husband had quit his job. He was a stay-at-home dad. Our house that we had bought had like mold and like black mold and termites. It was awful. It was this awful experience. I was like crying every day. But I had for my job, I had to go to this women's conference, and this woman at my table, I didn't know anyone. This room full of 200 plus women, I didn't know anyone. This woman that was at my table where we were just kind of gathering, waiting for the conference to begin, she said, we're like introducing ourselves. She's like, so how are you doing? And instead of kind of the typical corporate, good, how are you? I just like, to your point, I let my guard down and I was like, I'm doing awful, actually. I just moved and like I shared, right, you're right, what was going
Yes.
on. And the whole table's like, oh my gosh, and then they all start like giving me advice, trying to think of things that can help me, like introducing me to people. And this one girl next to me, she said, you're so brave. And at that point, I did not feel brave. I felt stupid. I felt weak. I felt like I had made the biggest mistake of my career potentially. But hearing someone else tell me I was brave then led me to realize that when I felt like I was at my weakest, I actually was at my strongest. And it helped me just rebound almost instantly and just go into, okay, this is happening mode. How do I fix it? So that was a very, very clear moment where I'm let my guard down. Yeah.
It's so good because so many people feel like you have to be so buttoned up, especially in corporate. And it's so nice to know that when you let your guard down, it was well received. I think that's a big fear for a lot of people. And no doubt you're going to run into people who don't receive the vulnerability well. But there are going to be people who can meet you where you are and help you out of that situation, like somebody did for you.
Yeah.
For us bold movers inside of our bold move, what is one piece of advice you have to keep our momentum and courage going when the initial excitement fades and the real work begins? Because it is always so exciting to get a new job or to start a new company or to have the vision for the book, but it is a whole other thing to complete these things or to find the excitement when you're in the journey, which can look very up and down. So do you have any advice for people about keeping momentum going?
Yeah, so I do say to give yourself grace, especially if you're
Mm-hmm.
juggling, right, a lot on your plate like we've talked about today. And I have this quote on my desk that says you never fail until you stop trying. So that's a good reminder for me that even if I take pauses or if I take breaks because life is hard, that I'm still not failing because I'm going to continue, right? It's just a pause there. So that's what I say to myself.
Final question for you. What do you wish you knew today about being bold that you wish you knew earlier on?
So honestly, I was thinking about it from the first rapid fire question to your point about being vulnerable with people, and I think what I wish I would have known earlier on is that don't change so people will like you, be the real you, and the right people will like you. And so it's
Mhm.
all about finding your people. To your point, like not all people are your people, but I think if you can more quickly identify the people that will respond well to your boldness or not, right, move on. If you find those the
Mhm.
not people, right, move on quickly, like, okay, hey, have a nice day. Right, but then find the right people, the people that will embrace the boldness, will help fuel it, and then you can turn that into your community.
Genevieve, it has really been a delight to have you here today. We have challenged conventional career wisdom. We have normalized that it's okay to step in and out of a career. We've talked about why it's important to building a career portfolio as a plan B, but also to express other sides of yourself. So I really appreciate you being here, Genevieve. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, probably on LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. I do have a website, warpaintconsulting.com, and my Warpaint Consulting email is on the contact us page. So would love to connect with anyone who's interested.
You are such a champion of this bold moves that we're helping to empower people to make. Thank you for being here. And for everybody else, we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.